I'm Larry Bishop, and you're listening to the World is Wrong podcast.
We're here to tell you how the world is wrong. The world is wrong about Ravenous.
Welcome to The World is Wrong, an extremely positive podcast where we celebrate films the world is wrong about. And I am one of your hosts, and I am Andras Jones.
And I'm also a host, and I'm Bryan Connolly.
And if we sound hungry and bearded, it's because we're talking about the film Ravenous. This is, I think, the final film of our month of wrongness that we call Wrongtober. It's a film. Now, would you say that this film is a film that is a horror film that is not a horror film? Or would you think of it as a film that most people don't think of as a horror film that actually is?
You know, I have no idea. Like, this movie is, and we'll get into it, the tone of this movie is all over the place. Like, on the surface, it certainly sounds like a horror film, like when you read about it, like the plot. And when you watch it, there are parts that are in the vein of a horror film, but it's also really funny, and it's really weird, and it's not like other horror films. It doesn't really work like other horror films. So, I don't know. I think it just kind of is in that area, just like with the other things that we've talked about in this month. It's like, it's just kind of floating around. There's a reason maybe why this movie is difficult for some to enjoy, because it doesn't so firmly plant itself in the horror genre.
Well, I enjoyed the heck out of it. I enjoyed it. This is the second time I've enjoyed it. I actually had seen it before and really liked it, and then kind of forgotten what it was. And then when you recommended the film I remembered was the film from the poster. And so I really had that, I don't mean this in an insensitive way. People in my family have had this. I had that Alzheimer's moment where I got to totally forget something and then experience it again like it was totally new.
Yeah.
And that might make you say that a film like this is a cannibal film that doesn't really stick to the ribs, but that is not the case. This is a really, really special film. So
yes.
Let's play a clip from this film, and then you can break it down for us, Bryan.
There might be spoilers. There might be spoilers. There might be spoilers.
We took shelter in a cave. Decided to wait until the storm had passed. But the storm did not pass. The trail soon became impossible. And we had run out of food. We ate the oxen, all the horses, even my own dog. And that lasted us about a month. After that, we turned to our belts, shoes, any roots we could dig up, but there's no real nourishment in those. We remained famished. The day that Jones died, I was out collecting wood. He had expired from malnourishment. And when I returned, the others were cooking his legs for dinner.
Oh.
Would I have stopped it had I been there? I don't know. But I must say, when I stepped inside that cave, the smell of meat cooking, I thank the Lord. I thank the Lord. And then things get out of hand.
Oh man, this movie is so good. And yeah, and you're right about the poster. Like I hadn't watched this movie because the poster just made it look kind of like a humorless. Like it just kind of seemed like, oh, this is going to be some horror movie about cannibals or whatever. It's about the like I don't need that. Like I don't want to watch that. But they don't bother to tell you that it's really funny, and the actors are brilliant. So let's talk about the plot here. I'm gonna try to do a simple version of the plot. Captain John Boyd, played by Guy Pearce, and this is all taking place in the 1800s. It's kind of the age of like Custer. Do they actually say the year? I don't remember if they actually say exactly what year it is. Like in my mind, it's like 1850 something, 1860 something, maybe earlier.
Yeah,
than that.
I feel like it's got to be post Civil War.
Post Civil War, somewhere kind of the middle.
It's
of
more
the
like
19th.
I'm thinking 1870,
Yeah.
1860, late 1860s.
Yeah.
Around then.
So Captain John Boyd, played by Guy Pearce, he was in war. He was in battle in America, but he has been labeled as Yella, as a coward, because he didn't run into battle. Instead, he chose to hide under a pile of dead bodies and just kind of lay there and wait it out. That's probably what I would have done. So, but he's basically then kicked out. Not really kicked out. He's not really discharged, but they send him west, as far west as they can go, to be like, okay, we're not going to discharge you, but you can go to this fort that's way, way, way over there, and just kind of be out of our, like, just get out of our way. You can just do stuff over there. So he travels to this little fort full of a bunch of oddballs. You have David Arquette, you have Jeremy Davies, Jeffrey Jones, Neil McDonough, is that how you say his name? That actor with the amazing hair. And
those crazy eyes. And Sheila Tousey, or Tousey, who you'll remember from Thunderheart.
Yes.
Was so excited to see her in the film.
And so they all kind of feel like people that have been sent out there. They're just an odd bunch. And they just kind of sit around in the snow in this fort and just kind of waiting for something to happen. They maybe are like the post where people will stop off at on journeys that they need to get some supplies or whatever. But who shows up? A FW, how do you say it? Calhoun? I'm going to say it wrong every time. Played by Robert Carlyle. He shows up.
Just say Calhoun.
Calhoun.
Yeah, FW Calhoun.
He shows up all wild-eyed, looks like a crazy mountain man, and has this story that he was part of a party on through the woods. They kind of got stranded in the snow and had to eat each other, basically. And he tells a story that like the guy in charge went crazy and started eating everyone, and he escaped. But there's still some survivors left. And all these soldiers need to come out and save like the remaining like women and children. And they're like, let's do it. ... We won't go into it right now because maybe we don't need to spoil all this movie. But there's a lot of people eating people that happens in this movie.
People
who eat
eating
people are the hungriest kind of people in the world. But yeah. And so, okay, you're just going to say, well, that sounds like a horror movie, Brian. But just wait. It's not quite, because it has this weird sense of humor to it. It has this weird quirkiness to it. It has a strange soundtrack that's not the type of soundtrack that you would normally associate with a movie of this. And it's basically all these great actors having a great time, but being very good in it. And it's a very smart script written by Ted Griffin, who, this was his first script ever made. And right after this, he was on a roll. He did the Ocean's 11 remake, which is great. Matchstick Men, which is great. He did Rumor Has It. Wrote episodes of The Shield. He's had quite a little career. And this is a very funny, very strange movie. It has an interesting little history that we'll talk about. But yeah, that's the plot, though, of the movie.
There's some great twists and turns.
Yeah.
It's Well, you know me. I guess this must not be much of a horror film because I really liked it.
But there are parts that I find kind of unsettling. There's a part in a cave that's very unsettling, upsetting.
Honestly, just the opening scenes where they're eating steak in front of this, in front of Guy Pearce. Like that's one of the things that this movie does. Well, I won't get. Well, I'll just finish my thought and then we'll get to talking about how the world is wrong about this film. But one of the things that this movie does is it's called Ravenous, but it could also just be called nauseous because it does this like the way it shows people eating, like the eating of food that humans eat is portrayed to me more disgustingly than the eating of humans in this movie, which is just sort of the theme of how disgusting eating is sort of runs through all of this. And yeah, the most unsettling images for me are watching the people eat
that
human
raw,
food, not
gross
human
steak.
food. Yeah, in front of this guy who's got PTSD from surviving, a battle that he, survived only by being a quote coward.
Yeah, and this movie is really gory. Like it doesn't hold back on the blood and guts. Like it goes for it.
Although I gotta say, again, because I know how squeamish I can be, like I find this film less gory than Casino.
But I think that I don't know. But like usually I'm kind of squeamish for that stuff too. But here it doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't bother me. It's certainly there's parts I'm like, oh no.
Yeah,
but I'm not like fainting or running away or screaming, or I'm not afterwards disturbed by this movie. I'm more just afterwards being like, what a great movie. So yeah.
So how is the world wrong about this film, Brian?
Well, this was a movie that I feel when it came out, no one really saw it. No one really liked it. It was considered a failure because it didn't make its movie back. And if anyone had heard
its money back, you mean?
What?
You said it didn't make its movie back. It didn't make its money back.
Didn't make its money back. Didn't make its movie money back. And I think that if anyone heard anything about it, it was just kind of more about sort of the behind-the-scenes mess that was kind of in the making of with this, which was sort of in entertainment news a little bit back then. Not a lot, but it's a movie that I think definitely was marketed incorrectly as well. And it just kind of came and went, and this director sadly kind of came and went, even though she's great. And yeah, and I think it's time to like dust this one off and be like, this is a great movie to watch in October, in Halloween, whatever you want to do. Like, this is just a fun. I think this movie's really fun.
Did you say Rocktober?
Wrongtober.
Wrongtober. Thank you.
So, yeah. That's why the world is wrong. I think that this movie nobody talks about this movie. No one remembers this movie, even though it has great actors in it that we still like today. This is the last film that the great actor John Spencer was in. This was the last movie he did before he passed away. So there's a lot to love here, and it's time to love it.
So I'm just looking at I'm actually surprised at what a non-success it is. It had what is now, you'd say, a pretty modest budget for such an expansive film. It's a $12 million budget, but the film only made like $2 million at the box office. Weirdly, they released it in the spring of 1999, which this feels more like a winter Halloween, is spring a good time to release a snowbound horror film?
No.
Right at the point when people are getting sick of the snow? I don't think so. Also, unfortunately, I'm sure if we look at 1999 is such an amazing film year. Yeah. You got to think that probably spring of 1999, like probably The Matrix and Fight Club come out or something.
Yeah.
So that didn't help.
No.
That didn't help. Can we talk about Antonia Bird for a little bit? Because
let's for a second talk about kind of the brief history of how she got into this movie, because I think it's important to kind of set her up. So this movie was originally going to be directed by, I'm going to totally say his name wrong, Milcho Menchevsky. He directed Before the Rain, which was sort of a foreign film, was a hit in the mid-90s, 94, I think. And he then got to make this movie. And they were filming it in Slovakia, in the mountains of Slovakia. He kept getting studio interference. He was not getting along with the producers or whatever. They parted ways. Then they brought in Raja Gosnell, who you may know as the director of Home Alone 3, was what he made right before this came out. And then the same year he directed Never Been Kissed, and then a year before he directed Big Mama's House, and then went on to do the Scooby-Doo movies and Beverly Hills Chihuahua. It did not work out. The actors and him, it didn't click, it didn't work out. So then Robert Carlyle said, I know who'd be great to direct this movie. I'm going to bring in my friend Antonia Bird, whom I've worked with before.
Multiple times.
She's the right person for this job. Brought her in. It worked out well. She still also had some problems, I guess, with the production. But delivered a very unique movie, delivered what I consider a great movie, a movie that should be added to that list of the best movies in 1999. A great year. So that's how she became involved, was through Robert Carlyle being like, okay, she's going to do this. Now you can kind of expand on her, because a lot of people are probably like, who? Who's this lady? I've never heard of this female filmmaker. Who is this person?
Yeah, well, Antonia Bird, she's kind of... Her career runs sort of in parallel to Stephen Frears. She breaks into to film doing gritty, issue-based British television in the 80s, sort of when Stephen Frears is really actually just starting to become go from TV to filmmaking. This is when Antonia Bird sort of shows up on the scene, and this is her third film with Robert Carlyle. He's kind of her Robert De Niro. Yeah, in her first film, which is Priest from 1994, he plays the lover of the gay priest played by Linus Roach, in a film that also features a pre-breakout Tom Wilkinson performance, and just a very earnest English film about what at the time was a more controversial topic. And have you seen this film?
No, but I remember people being very upset by it when it came out. I remember it being sort of like, oh, they made this movie about this gay priest, like, oh, this is disgusting, oh, this is you can't do that, and a lot of people complaining about it and being like, it was very controversial at the time. I want to say they even tried to make it rated NC-17 or something like crazy like that. I might be totally wrong on that, but
that's crazy, because if you watch it now, it feels like not even HBO worthy. Maybe it is. I don't want to say HBO worthy in terms of quality, but in terms of that there's nothing particularly edgy to it. It seems like a very heartwarming story about a difficult time. Anyway, it's a very first film from a really solid filmmaker, just displaying what they can do with a small story and but not a big story, but a small canvas, and beginning this very fruitful creative relationship with Robert Carlyle that's going to lead us to Ravenous, and Robert Carlyle playing a very, like what you'd think of as I would say an un-Robert Carlyle kind of role. And just doing it. It's a great film. So then she follows that up with her big Hollywood film, which I haven't seen, what you have, which is Mad Love.
Mm-hmm.
Talk about it. I
think it's a solid movie. That's it's a Drew Barrymore sort of like drama. She's very good in it. It's just an enjoyable movie. It's not super special, but like it's just a pretty solid movie. Like I've seen it. I liked it.
It's like a Bonnie and Clyde type thing, right? Or like a gun crazy kind of thing. Is that the idea?
Kind of. I mean, it's been a while since I've seen it, so I don't remember all of it. But I remember it just being kind of like she's giving a really good performance, and this is sort of like
Barrymore is
Drew
but
Barrymore.
Chris O'Donnell,
Yeah.
not so much.
I don't really like Chris O'Donnell, but I find him kind of bland. But it's like, I don't know, just sort of, it's just, it's just kind of a mid-90s sort of solid movie where it's like all the elements there are good. It's nothing very memorable, but it's like a well-made, well-acted movie. Like, it's got Joan Allen in it. Like, it has like real people in it being good. So,
do you think that Chris O'Donnell is sort of like the Van Johnson of his time? Like, there's a lot of boring stuff, but if, like, at the end of his career, the few really interesting things are the ones we're going to go back to, and it'll be like, he actually was pretty good. Like, you think he's more like the Van Johnson or more like the Martin Milner?
I think he's just not. I just don't really connect with him. I don't. Well, if you want, there's punks in the movie. And I wrote a punk review for this movie. Would you like me to read my punk review for this movie?
Oh, yes, please do. So this is from...
This is Mad Love.
Give us... It's from the book, which is...
So this is in the second... This edition hasn't come out yet. This is a new review that I wrote like a few years ago. So we're still compiling. So Zach, my writing companion, Zach Carlson, and I, we wrote this book 11 years ago. There was a complete history of punks in movies, where we watched every movie with a punk in it, and then we cataloged it, wrote about it, just obsessively, just said, here's every movie with a punk, whether it was, Ladies and Gentlemen, The Fabulous Stains, a movie about punk, or whether it was a punk like crossing the street in the background of a Bette Midler movie. It all counted. So we're doing a new edition of it slowly, and I got to watch and write about Mad Love. So,
okay,
if you'll let me do a little reading, it's only a paragraph. Okay. Backwards hat-wearing Matt, Chris O'Donnell, falls for wild-girled Casey, Drew Barrymore, who ends up actually just being mentally ill. Takes place in the heart of Seattle being cool. Everyone wears flannel. All the teens hang out and drink coffee at a stand run by a guy who looks like the Hulkster. Casey asks Matt, "So when it's not raining in this lousy town, what do you do with yourself?" Matt says, "Hang out." And hang out they do. He invites her to a 7-year bitch show. The band performs Scratch. Matt is impressed that Casey knows all the words. They jump up and down with other alternative trash bags. There's bleached-haired dude, lady with a shaved head except for a strip in the front, fella with oversized t-shirt of alien and top hat and sunglasses, and various other kids with dyed hair. This is the only movie I can think of where the no-rules pixie dream girl ends up being actually crazy. It's fun when she dances wildly in her room, but not when she tapes thousands of eyes to the walls of your room to keep you safe. Matthew Lillard shows up in yet another movie in this book as a long-haired skater wise guy. Don't worry, he's not in here long. I enjoyed the part where O'Donnell watches Jack Horkheimer's Star Hustler, an amazing PBS show where a very excited, casually dressed rotund man told you about the week's astronomy happenings. That's my explanation.
Mad
of
Love.
Mad Love.
1995. Featuring my former co-star, Drew Barrymore, and Chris O'Donnell, the man who got my job in that movie. I actually live in the Northwest. Come on, Drew.
Yeah, Chris O'Donnell, not believable as a Pacific Northwest guy.
I'm barely believable as a Pacific Northwest guy.
Anyways, so that's sort of her big break into Hollywood.
But the next one is actually, I think, well, Ravenous is the best. I think Ravenous is like by far the best. It's so good. But the one before it, Face from 1997, another film with Robert Carlyle, this time with Robert Carlyle and Ray Winstone and Phil Davis. Do you know who Phil Davis is? He was in Quadrophenia. He played one of the young punks in Quadrophenia, and he's in a lot of British television. He's one of those British. I think of him kind of like the actor who played D-Day in Animal House.
Oh, yeah.
So he's iconic as this one young character, but most of his work has been as a much more sort of jowly old English guy, tough, like one of those tough old English guy things. He feels like he's been playing older for a while, and it has a sort of sexy beast. If it's sort of sexy beast Tarantino, because it's 1997, but it's English and it's not doing it's much more grounded and interesting. But it starts with these two thieves, Robert Carlyle and Ray Winstone, going and doing something violent. So that sort of has that Pulp Fiction-y kind of hitmen feel to it. Mm-hmm. But and because it's of that era, I guess maybe that's how it got made. But it's just a really great. It's in the way that the Frears stuff is really great. It's very grounded, and the details are really great, and it's a very like film about men, but it's thoughtful about it in a way that you can tell is coming from. And it kind of reminds me of Slapshot, a film that was written by a woman that is such a macho film, but it's macho in a way that is made by someone who really loves that and gets it. Maybe also like Point Break and Catherine Bigelow, the way that's a very macho film, but it's also the point of view has this thoughtfulness to it that it sets up this next film, Ravenous. So then it's great that Robert Carlyle draws her into this, I guess, mess of a production, but at the same time, as you said, this is the first screenplay from a writer who's clearly something special. So there's something special about this script, and they're trying to find the right combination to unlock it and make it work. And this is where World is wronging it, is that this is a case where they succeeded, and yet commercially, culturally, they failed. But I don't think you could make a better movie about this from this script. I can't imagine a better version of this movie existing.
Yeah.
Can you?
No. It's yeah. I mean, and who knows, like, if they kept any of the stuff the other guy directed, and maybe that's why the tone is weird, but the tone is so strange and off-kilter in the best way, where it doesn't feel like a mess to me. It doesn't feel like a hodgepodge of ideas. It really feels like a very clear vision of this just very strange film. And like the movie starts with this zany opening credits quote with zany sound effects. And you're like, wait, what? This is like immediately within the first second, you're like, this is not the movie that was advertised. And then you go to these beautiful shots. You go from the zany quote of being like, oh, is this like a Zucker Brothers movie? Is this Silence of the Hams? Like, what is this? And then you go to these beautiful shots and with these amazing actors, like with these like Guy Pearce doesn't really say much at the beginning of this movie. But he has this great face, this guy's been through war. And that doesn't match this zany opening. And then the movie kind of keeps unfolding like that. It has this amazing... It does this kind of amazing balancing act of like this grotesque imagery, this beautiful imagery, this weird humor, and she pulls it off beautifully. Like, I think she is a great filmmaker just based on this. And it's sad that this is her last movie. This is the last thing she made that was a feature-length motion picture in movie theaters. Because didn't she do more TV after this?
Yeah. It's one of those things where, well, this is, so depending upon the prism that you view the world through, well, I'll give you an example. I was speaking with Jen Brown, who is a guest on our Oscars episode and as the co-host of Genre Graveyard. And I was telling her about this film, and she was like, oh, yeah, I need to see that. And I told her the story of Antonia Bird, and she's like, "Well, yeah, that happens. That's the way it is for women in the film business. Is you doesn't matter if you succeed. It's just too difficult to survive in that world, and you get to make a few, and then it doesn't matter." And I didn't want to discount that point of view, which is why I'm sharing it here. And at the same time, it also made me think of how many of the filmmakers that we cover on this podcast are people who got to make about 3 or 4 films.
Yeah.
Whether it's Tim Robbins or Steve Shainberg or to some degree Phil Jonua, who we're going to be getting into with State of Grace. He got to make a few more, but in a way, I don't know. He only got to make a few the way that, again, it's maybe it's a different class of problem than other directors, but it made me think about that 3 or 4 film window that maybe is just the window that some directors get. To me, it's always weird that, like with Steve Shainberg, like Fur, An Imaginary Portrait of Diane Arbus, is the best version of the thing that he got successful for with Secretary, and then it doesn't succeed. And I feel like this is the same thing with like Ravenous is maybe like Jennifer's Body, a film that is just so good. And, maybe a snowbound horror shouldn't have been released in the spring equinox of 1999.
I think too, like, this is not an easy movie to get into. Like, if you're definitely, like, if you wanted the movie to be what the poster told you it was, you're not going to like this movie. And you're going to be thrown off by so many parts of it. Like, the soundtrack to some people would be so strange that it would just probably ruin the movie for them. Like, the soundtrack is by Damon Albarn from Blur and Gorillaz and Michael Nyman. And it's a weird soundtrack. Like,
so good though.
But it's amazing.
So good.
But it's not. It's I don't know who, if it was Bird who picked them to do the soundtrack or what. But like, it's a very interesting choice, because you would think something like this would have sort of like a more basic sort of like soundtrack of like, oh, they're running through the woods. The music is now going to be like telling you that it's tense, and oh, here's this sweeping shot of the mountains and them on horses. You're going to have that kind of this sort of music, but instead you have something that's very modern, that's very experimental, and will sometimes slip into like banjo music or whatever. But it, even when it does like music that seems of the time, the tone of it is kind of contradictory of what's happening on screen in a very weird way. Like there's a part where Jeremy Davies is being chased, and the music is kind of jaunty, even though his character is like maybe gonna get killed. But it's a very odd choice. All the music is very odd, but it's really beautiful, and it works because this whole movie is sort of like trying to like kind of work against itself in a good way of like, we're going to have this tone, but in this scene it shouldn't have this tone, and we're going to have this kind of part seem funny even though this part is disgusting. And I just love it. And I don't know if that's all on the page, that's all in the script, maybe it is, or maybe it's just that kind of beautiful thing of all these actors finding a director that can click with and just kind of making all these right, interesting decisions.
Yeah, it's, when an actor brings a director onto a film, that puts that actor at such a state of ease that they sort of become a kind of producer on the film, right? So Robert Carlyle brings her in. It just makes me think that maybe there's something about that. There's something about the wildness of the performances. As you're talking, I'm thinking, instead of being marketed as a horror film, this should have been marketed to the audience for Jeremiah Johnson and McCabe and Mrs. Miller. And, maybe I feel like this is the film that Fearless Vampire Killers wanted to be.
Yeah.
The Polanski, horror satire that I just never, like, I haven't seen it in years, but when I saw it, I didn't really get it. But I feel like I was rewatching just the beginning of this movie today and thinking, oh, this feels like the tone that film is telling us it's going to reach, but it doesn't.
And it's that great thing too, where the plot is crazy and not real, but you have these great actors in there just selling it, and they're just selling this insane stuff that could be considered silly, but because you have like the best actors of the time,
Yeah.
like this is Guy Pearce, like at the height of him being amazing. Like this is between LA Confidential and Memento, you know, like this is him being like the guy that we really liked in these kind of strange, interesting movies. And Robert Carlyle kind of going off of Train Spotting with this, and just Jeremy Davies sort of starting to be in like a bunch of movies being this weirdo. And it's just, they're doing brilliant performances here. Like, and I think no one talks about the performances in this movie when they talk about these actors. They talk about every other movie they make. But when the movie just kind of, like the movie kind of keeps getting turned up a notch. I feel it keeps getting weirder and crazier. And when it gets to the last half hour, when it's basically like Guy Pearce versus Robert Carlyle, they're having a great time. I'm having a great time watching them try like go at it with each. It's just like, it's amazing. It's like two great actors just doing as good of a job as they do in anything else, but in this bizarre kind of genre horror comedy hybrid thing.
We mentioned Catherine Bigelow and Point Break, and there's a moment in this film where Guy Pearce jumps off of a cliff, and it reminded me of Keanu Reeves jumping out of the plane without his parachute. And it's like, what? There's something about like women making macho films in the 90s that the ultimate thing for a male hero to do is to literally jump to his death.
Well, I also like how in this movie, like how beaten up everyone gets, like how wrecked Guy Pearce, like he doesn't just fall off the cliff and then run away like Arnold Schwarzenegger all fine. Like he falls through a bunch of trees, rolls down a whole hill, then gets trapped in a place, like, and kind of has to be there for a while because he really hurt himself badly. And yeah, that part's great.
Yeah.
And it's a good looking stunt too. However they did it, it really looks like somebody jumped off a cliff.
Yeah, everything in this movie looks, again, it's kind of like budgets are weird to talk about, but $12 million seems very cheap for a movie that looks and feels this epic. That's like to shoot in the snow is not easy. And it
looks like it is a great looking movie. Like the locations in Slovakia that they had picked for the American West are breathtaking. There's these beautiful shots of like, and it has this great sort of
doesn't it feel Altman-esque?
It does feel Altman-esque. It has that kind of, well, because it has that ensemble thing going on where you have basically
David Arquette as the stoner.
You have eight
cowboy.
people. You have 8 people in one little area. So it has this kind of that sort of Altman feeling of like, let's put 8 people in this one place. But even though it's a period piece, you have people like David Arquette acting sort of a little, like commenting a little more on like people of a modern age, but in this Old West thing. And yeah, just like McCabe and Mrs. Miller, just sort of like, this isn't the kind of soundtrack you normally would hear in a Western. These aren't the type of people you normally see. Like, and is this even a Western, or does it just take place in the West? Like, it's not about cowboys and Indians. Like, there's Native American characters in here, and they talk about like their beliefs and stuff, but it's not like that kind of movie. And it's about cannibals, which is strange. And yeah, it's just like it's a very unique tone, this movie.
You think it would have done better if it had been called The Hungry Eight?
The Hungry Eight. Yeah. Yeah, I wonder if Tarantino's a fan of this. Like, it's a Western in the way that The Hateful Eight's a Western. It's a bunch of weirdos in one place, just kind of, and then it kind of has a feeling of like The Thing a little bit too, of just sort of like you're surrounded by the snow, you're isolated, who do you trust? Like, and the mythology they have with the cannibalism in this, where it's kind of like vampire lore a little bit, that has that kind of like vampire peer pressure you see in movies like The Lost Boys, with like, come on, do this, you'll love it. You know, it has that kind of thing, but with cannibals, and just the whole thing they come up with, like what happens when you eat people and what it does to you, is really fun. Like the way they take it, but they stick to it, and it works. And the way certain people come back because of it, and like it's just really great how they. It's a really smart script, basically.
Yeah. The reveals. That's what I'm saying. I feel like if it had been marketed as a odd snowbound western that also happened to have a cannibal subplot, I feel like it would, like the audience for this, if you're looking for a cannibal movie, you're probably not going to be satisfied by this. And the audience that's really going to love this is movies that like people who like to see movies with great actors trudging through the snow in beautiful places and then getting beat to shit and surviving. And in this case, they're getting beat to shit and surviving because they have, whether by choice or by, just happenstance, come in contact with the meat of the flesh of the human body. I just feel like this could do from a little bit more of the wolf marketing. Like this is a character study of cannibals in the mountains rather than, wow, look at this scary movie with teeth and they're going to eat you. And it's like, that's not really what that's not the feeling you get from this movie. Like you don't get scared by this movie.
Yeah,
right?
They market it as a horror movie, and they market it as like a horror movie.
In the spring. They market it as a horror movie in the spring.
And they wanted you to see it at the mall with like your friends. But really, this should have been touted as like a prestige film. Like that's what it should have. It should have been like, we're going to open this at Sundance and we're going to show this at festivals. And this is a movie that should be playing at the art house theater, not the multiplex. Because if you leaned more into like, here's this weird movie that, yes, it's about cannibals, but also it has this built-in kind of quirky, it's like, this is a midnight movie. This is a cult movie. And they should have done that from the get-go. They shouldn't have done it as a opening against whatever giant movie came out that week. It's, and then they advertised it as like this fun, crazy movie that you should see with your friends on a Friday night, and it's just not that. It's too smart for that. It's too well made. Like this is kind of like an art film, but it's a funny movie. And I think it just they worked against it by thinking, I'm sure that's the studio's fault, whoever put it out, to like try to think this was a movie that was going to be an opening weekend hit or something, when clearly it can never ever be that. This is not a movie for regular people to enjoy. Like people's parents are getting, unless they know what they're getting into, and I think that's the problem. Is like you just can't sell it a certain way, and then everyone's like, who you're selling it to isn't going to like it, and the people who will like it, you're not letting them know about it in the right way.
I think it's actually the opposite. I feel like this is more of, okay, when I say parents, like my mom would never watch a horror film. Well, if I'm in it, and then begrudgingly. And I'll never hear the end of it. But there are films, like the people who would go, like, this isn't any gorier than the, what's the one that DiCaprio won the award for, where he fights a bear?
Similar title, The Revenant.
Okay, yes. So I don't like, The Revenant is pretty brutal, has some really brutal stuff. I feel like The Revenant is on almost every level a more brutal and less pleasant film than this. This is a carnival compared to that film. And I feel like the audience for both of those, if you marketed it right, the audience would be the same for both films. Like, I want to see great actors being brutalized by nature. Or what was that one, the Mammoth film with Alec Baldwin?
Oh, The Edge?
The Edge.
Great movie.
Like, that's like, that one was, we could do that one because that's one that the world is probably wrong about. Although I've seen it enough times on cable that it probably has some great life on cable TV. So probably a lot of people see it and love it. But I feel like just even like the way that film was marketed is the way a film like this should be marketed. Now we're just getting into Sunday morning, or what is it, Monday morning quarterbacking. I don't know. When does football stop? Tuesday morning quarterbacking. But it is something to put your mind around. Like if this film had Robert Carlyle and Guy Pearce on the poster in a way that made you like, oh, we're going to see these two great actors go head to head in the wilderness. And by the way, they're trying to eat each other, which they're not. But
yeah, it kind of makes me think of that movie Bone Tomahawk that came out a few years ago. Like, and that movie was marketed well and everyone loved it, and they did the smart thing of just kind of slowly building word of mouth. Did this strange movie also about kind of like cannibals, Old West, starring weird actors you love like Kurt Russell and Richard Jenkins, and just like, but that movie like kind of built as this strange, like, what is that movie? Oh, that seems interesting. I want to watch that. And I think that it could have, like, maybe if Ravenous had come out 5 years ago as opposed to 1999, maybe they would have been more smart about it and done it sort of like you play the genre festivals. You really let people find this movie and start telling all their friends that they saw this crazy movie at midnight with these great actors doing these insane things. Because there's nothing bad about this movie.
yeah.
Like, this is a fantastic movie. That it's wrong. It's wrong that nobody's seen it. It's sad that it wasn't this kind of hit in the way that it should have been.
Yeah.
And like, who knows if it was what we could have gotten from Antonia Bird if this movie worked for everybody and it actually clicked. Like, what would she have followed it up with? I don't know.
That's what I'm saying. Is like, if you want go back, like I really encourage people not only to watch this film, but particularly to watch Face. If the director who made that film, everything that Catherine Bigelow has done in terms of making action films and maybe even action and issue oriented films, and I might even hope with a slightly different political compass from Antonia Bird, but she has all those chops. You watch that film and you think, you put this together with Ravenous, and the follow-up to this film should be, I don't know what it like. It should be like De Palma's Mission Impossible. She's capable of that, and instead she gets kind of relegated to, goes back to the realm of TV, and made a couple of. Well, she made one film, I guess, as a producer. She produced one other film, but she never really got to direct another film. And then she died in 2013. So we will not get any more films from Antonia Bird. But it's a damn shame, because this film is 1999. So that's 14 years of someone who has got to be, had to have been, certainly was capable, because as you said, this film, not only is there nothing wrong with this film, there's a lot that is just great and seems like a fantastic calling card for the ability to come into a mess, as you said, and make a really quality film. And sure, it didn't make the money that it was a failure financially, but it's just odd that a film like that you and I can both recognize as being just excellent doesn't lead to her getting to make more films. And we're not even talking about in a time that's particularly unfriendly to female directors. Like 2000 to now has been a renaissance of female filmmakers. Certainly there's a long way to go, but it's not as if there haven't been all of these institutions and festivals and movement towards cultivating that. So it really is a mystery as to how Antonia Bird fell through the cracks, to the point where I've never heard of her or thought of her until doing the research for this podcast. And now Yeah, and now I feel robbed of something that, that this is what happens when the world is wrong. We miss out on some good shit.
But we're lucky that she was able to make this movie, and I'm happy that we're finally telling people about it. It's crazy that I didn't realize Ted Griffin wrote this movie. Like, I was a fan of his other movies, and this movie was never brought up or really mentioned in anything that I ever read about Matchstick Man, Ocean's 11. Like, movies that are very smart scripts, very well written. This movie's no exception. And hopefully he's proud of this movie. Hopefully he is not sad. Like, I know some people get soured when production is weird about their own movie. But, like, this is something he should be proud of. Like, just all the weird scenes of conversation, like, over, just, like, between people, like, over food, and just, like, in these weird moments. It's so good. It's so funny. And I just feel like there's the reason why all these good actors in these movies, they must have recognized how good the script was.
Yeah.
Like these aren't people who just go and at the time wouldn't just do anything.
Yeah, with a script like the story sounds like something where it's a script that everyone knows is great, and then there's all these people vying for it. It's kind of amazing that it did turn out as good as it is, despite that that it doesn't feel like it's a mess of a production. The tone doesn't shift. It feels very, the through line is there. And yeah, that's the magic of film, man. That is, who knows? Maybe I want to find an analogy for, how the different directors cannibalized each other's work, and each one grew stronger from the other. And then Antonia Bird came in and was able to fully take on the life force of these other two Slavic directors. Are they both Slavs?
No, the other one is, I think he's just an American. He's Raja Gosnell is I think he's just from California or something like that.
Well,
yeah. Funny enough that you mentioned the Altman thing. He was the editor on a bunch of Altman movies. But he didn't get to work on this movie. But maybe he was brought in because he was assistant editor on Quintet, In a Perfect Couple, and Popeye, and Health.
And while we're talking about people who are associated with this, I also wanted to point out that Joseph Running Fox is in it. He plays plays Sheila Taussie's character's brother in the film, and he was in the film The Valley of the Gods that I sang the praises of in our Oscars episode. He's not the man who fucks the mountain, but he's the older Native man who basically fulfills the function of delivering the baby that is birthed from the result of that man fucking that mountain in Valley of the Gods. He's also in the movie Seems Like Old Times, bracketing this in the early Chevy Chase Goldie Hawn movie. I'm sure I think in that one she plays the one of the jokes in it that I hate in that movie is that Goldie Hawn plays a do-gooder defense attorney, and a lot of her clients play really awful, like just weird racial stereotypes. And I think I remember which character he was, and it's one of those. And then Chevy Chase is always making fun. It's unfortunately distasteful, but because I want to love that era of Chevy Chase movies because I love like foul play so much. Anyway, I digress. My point is that Joseph Running Fox is has an illustrious career, and he is also in this film, and we should mention that.
Cool.
Anyone else that's a standout?
I mean, it's such a small cast, It's I just feel like if you like Guy Pearce, and why wouldn't you? Like, if you love his performance in like The Proposition or just anything, like he just has such a great face in his like eyes. And so much of this movie, he doesn't really say a lot. It's a lot of him just kind of looking kind of beaten up and kind of out past everybody else. and he's giving a really great performance. Like, I think one of his best, but sadly, it's just kind of nobody thinks about it in that way.
Yeah, he's the Jeremiah Johnson role.
He's so good. He's just so good. And I just love him. And I just loved this era too of Jeremy Davies as like playing this sort of like in a band of weirdos, he's the weirdest. And like, just like he was in the Solaris remake and also in Secretary. But like he's just really good, always very good, and just sort of like having a great time. And I don't know, I just feel like I honestly wish that this movie was longer. I just wanted, like, I kind of feel like this would have made a great TV show. Right, what, like, you know,
that is
like,
one of the things that's great about it. This flies by. There's a lot in this movie. It comes in at like 100 minutes.
But it feels so short. Like, it really feels like half a movie, not in the way that it's written or made, but it's like this the pace of it. Like, it's over 90 minutes, but it flies by, and I kind of wanted to kind of hang out more. Like, wouldn't it be great if there was a show that was like this, like sort of like Deadwood, but about just 8 people in the woods and there's cannibals? I'd watch that show. Like, if maybe someone needs to bring back Ravenous and pitch it as like a TV show. Like, you can have a whole world. You have the cannibals in the woods. You can have these people at this fort. I don't know. I can see that working. You can make it in the era of COVID. It's a small amount of people. Like, you can go in the middle of woods and make a show with just 8 people.
Hey, Bryan, you're a screenwriter. You're a director. I'm an actor. I'm a producer. I don't know what. There's like really nothing. Like, when we're at this point, when we say someone should do this, if we're not willing to do it, how can we expect anyone else to? So let's get on it.
Ravenous, the TV series.
Yes, we just need to find the what is the equivalent? Does it even exist? The equivalent of Guy Pearce and Robert Carlyle in this film cinematic environment that we're in? Did they like it? It's odd, but I'm sure they exist and they're out there. And at the same time, where are the films that allow actors to build up that kind of cinematic credibility from one like, who's making LA Confidential now? Who's making Memento now? You know, I don't want to sound like an old guy saying, but just like budget wise, who's investing $12 million in making sort of what Steve Shainberg was talking about when he was on, you know, who's investing the bare minimum money it makes for people who are really good to go someplace and make a movie that you really want to watch, where every shot, as you said, there's nothing bad about this film. That's the real horror here, to end Wrongtober, is the loss of the ability to invest, to lose $12 million on a movie like this, because that's not lost.
Yeah.
Like, if you think of the $100 million movies that resulted in successful movies in the sense that they made $150 million, but really don't stick to the ribs.
Yeah.
That's
what's great is, like, okay, this movie failed. You can still see it. Like, that's the great thing about movies, is that no matter how hard a movie tanks or how nobody sees it in the theater, you can still watch the movie. It's not like the movie gets deleted from the earth. I mean, there's some movies, I guess, that have been, you know, haven't been released, or it's harder to find. But like, when you have a movie like this with a bunch of famous people in it, you might have to take a little bit of work to track it down, but it's there. It's not like locked in a vault that you can never find it. Like Ravenous, you'll be able to take it out of its box and watch it and go, damn, that's great. And you don't have to think about or even know about the history of it not doing well. Who cares about a movie that didn't make money, that has nothing to do with its quality? And yeah, it is sad that, like, yeah, this, like, millionaires need to just start throwing their money at just weird movies. Like, if you have so much money and $12 million means nothing to you, just blow it on a movie that's going to be different. Why not? Why isn't Steven Spielberg producing movies like Ravenous? That guy's got so much money. You don't need to be producing other prestige movies by other people. Like, those movies will find money. You go to Hollywood and you go to all the places and you say, okay, what are the scripts that have been around forever, what everyone loves, but nobody wants to make because they're too strange and won't make any money back? Here, I'm just going to throw $200 million at these 5 movies, and we're just going to make them, and at least there'll be 5 interesting, crazy movies in the world. So that's my challenge to you millionaires out there listening to this.
Well, it's really the billionaires. I mean, the two things it makes me think of, because I think Spielberg is a weird example because he is such an industry unto himself that he does fund a lot of stuff, but he wouldn't fund a film like Ravenous because he is interested in making films that enrich the world that his children are going to inherit. He's, it's honorable, but it's not like, whereas like American Zoetrope is an example of a company that continued to invest in films that are kind of like Ravenous, or that are weird and odd and wonderful, strange pieces. I keep coming back to something that Paul Williams talks about in the interview that I did with him about the November Men. That's on the episode page for that on our website at www.theworldiswrongpodcast.com. That it's something that the director Jean Renoir told him when he was a film student, or when he was in college, and he got the opportunity to meet him. And he said that directors have basically 3 films in them. And in a sense, that is, like, you could look at it as a negative thing, like, that Antonia Bird only got to make 4 films, and it is a tragedy. And at the same time, there is kind of a maturation process that you get to see from the 4 films she got to make. And I think if we look at it, we may find that is the arc for a lot of great directors, because they don't get to the point of being a Spielberg or a Coppola, where basically you have so many choices that you get to make a lot of wrong ones. Mm-hmm. But when you're just becoming yourself, when you're figuring out what your 3 or 4 films are, then, that's all going to be exciting work. There's no duds in there. Although I guess you say Mad Love is kind of a dud for you.
It's a strange movie. It doesn't really work. But
maybe in an alternate universe, I worked with Antonia Bird in that film. It was actually much better, and we all had better careers.
And you got to be in Ravenous.
I got to be in Ravenous. We saw, and then Antonia Bird went on to have an amazing career. We had a much more enlightened millennium. We solved global warming, and there was never COVID.
This is a great story.
Missed out, people. Missed out. You know what? The moral of the story is, I should have been more of a cannibal. I wasn't enough of a cannibal for Hollywood in the 90s. If I was willing to eat more of my peers.
Yeah. Oh man, it's
Oh. Okay. Well, happy Wrongtober, Bryan.
We did it, and I didn't eat too much candy corn. I ate enough, but not too much. And man, this is a good month. We from Wolf to this, we covered a lot of good. We got a lot of good things that I think, movies that people don't know that they should see and love, and now they have these new favorite movies. Hopefully,
yes. And like the characters in this movie with human flesh, if you have watched all these movies, you have taken their power into you. You now have the power of the wolf. You have the power of Don's Plum.
No.
You have and the power of Ravenous. Yes, happy Wrongtober, everyone. May it be a beautiful Wrongvember.
Hi, I'm Bryan.
And I'm AJ,
And we have a podcast called The Director's Wall.
examining a filmmaker's career, film by film. First up was M. Night Shyamalan, then Francis Ford Coppola. Who's next? Is there anything to this whole auteur theory? Find out on
The Director's Wall.
subscribe via Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, or your preferred listening platform.
Hey, this is an ad. Don't fast forward. Be over in a second. Are you obsessed with a sports team, a band, or even collecting chia pets? Then listen to my new podcast, Rep Your Squad, on Paper House Network, where I dive into what drives people crazy. So if you're a 40-year-old man with a Stan collection, or a middle-aged woman who loves the Spice Girls, that's cool. We don't judge here on Rep Your Squad with me, Chris Scopo. See? It's over.
Dear listener, if you are just discovering our podcast, you can find all of our episodes on our website at theworldiswrongpodcast.com. You can also write to us at contact@theworldiswrongpodcast.com or follow us on Instagram at theworldiswrongpodcast. And now, back to the show. Well, I'm feeling hungry. How about you?
Yeah, let's have some sloppy joes, some stew. I don't know what's in that stew, but it smells so good.
Imagine if people came to trick or treat at your door and you just came out with this bowl of sloppy stew.
and just hurled it into these bags. What's the weirdest thing you ever got trick or treating? Or is there anything strange you got?
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I think I got chased by some kids in the neighborhood, probably.
I remember there was a person. There's a person that was giving out like little boxes of raisins, which I thought was really lame as a kid. I don't want raisins for Halloween. And then I remember someone giving up floss and toothbrushes to be like clever, being like, "Here's floss and toothbrushes for all the candy," and it's just like, I already have that. Like, just give me more candy. I don't have that.
Wow. You're so ungrateful. They give you nice raisins and dental hygiene equipment, and all you want is that deadly, gross sugar.
Hey, when I was a kid, I would go wild for Halloween. I would get so much candy. I would like go home, dump the bag out, and then go back out and just keep hitting as many neighborhoods as possible. But it's funny, as a grown-up now, I can just buy candy whenever I want, and I don't do it as often as I thought I would when I was, 10.
Well, let's just be clear on this. It's not that when you were a kid, you used to go crazy about Halloween. You still go crazy about Halloween. You devoted your late teens and early 20s to creating All Freakin' Night in Olympia.
True.
And now you refuse to watch anything but horror films in the month of Wrongtober.
This is very true, and this is a tradition that my wife started. It was sort of came out of Vulcan Video. They called it Shocktober, and that's what we call it in our house. And at Vulcan, it was strict rules that if you were working in the month of Shocktober, you can only play in the store horror-related things, and that was it. Like, that was the only thing that was allowed. And then we've now continued that at home. It's only 31 days of horror or horror adjacent. Because I get scared easily, and I'm not a huge horror movie fan. So I'll be like, this Abbott and Costello movie counts. Sure.
So if I was working at Vulcan, could I show The Believer or Dawn's Plum? Could I show Dawn's Plum?
If you no. I don't think you. I think it would have to really strongly play as a Halloween horror type thing. Also, like, it still had to be like appropriate. So we couldn't show, like, if you worked at night, you could show an R-rated thing. But during the day, it would have to be
there's nothing
strictly PG-13 or under.
You don't play the
Language.
sound. You don't play the sound, do you?
Yeah, we did. In the store, we would.
Oh,
yeah,
really?
We would have the sound up. Oh, yeah.
Well, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I like that.
But yeah, it's been many years of this. I really like it because it sort of gives me the chance to watch all the horror movies I've skipped over that I'm too nervous to watch. And so it's a good month to just be like, okay, let's just take the bandage off. Let's just do it. So
Have you considered like just like setting up all of your viewing like that? Like in February, you only watch rom-coms.
I think
in November you only watch assassination thrillers.
I think after this month, I get pretty burnt out on following these rules, and then I want to just watch everything and anything. I don't like to have it be. So, I mean, I already work on all these books and stuff, so I already have these year-long, these are the things I must watch lists. So I think it's good to not have more than 1 month where it's so strict.
I wonder if there's someone out there who does that, though. Like in September, it's all high school. It's all high school films. All teen dramas that take place at high school. Back to school.
I'm sure there is.
But I can't watch Breakfast Club in October. But it is kind of a horror film. Breakfast Club is kind of a horror film. Could I play that in Vulcan Video?
No, you can play Weird Science. Like, I'll give you Weird Science, but that was about it.
That's not as scary.
Yeah, but there's like a monster in it. It's got supernaturally stuff in it.
There's a monster in The Breakfast Club. It's Emilio Estevez. What he does to that kid, it's terrible. That story. If it's ever happened to you, that is terrifying. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, happy Wrongtober, everyone. I hope that you've enjoyed our month of wrongness. We're not going to get any less. We're not going to. Our podcast isn't going to get any less wrong in the coming months. But there's a particular flavor to the wrongness of Wrongtober. So I hope you've enjoyed that flavor. It's a little bit raisiny, perhaps.
Well, we're still going to continue with the uncomfortable kind of horrors of humanity with our next episode.
Yeah, we have our Wrongtober spilled into Wrongvember, and we're gonna next week we're gonna be covering the film The Believer from 2001, starring Ryan Gosling as a Jewish Nazi, and a film directed by Henry Bean. And I had the good fortune to speak with Henry Bean on that episode, and his take on the film is that it's a comedy. So wow. Not only is it a horror film that people don't think of as a horror film, but it's not even a horror film. It's actually a hilarious, rip-roaring comedy about a Jewish Nazi played by Ryan Gosling. And
I'll be interested to hear his defense as to how it's a comedy, because when I saw it, I did not feel that way. But maybe I was wrong.
Well, you're part of the world, right?
Yeah, I am.
Yeah, well, there you go. So, well, stick around. I hope you stick around and check that one out next week. All right, sorry, let me say it again. Well, I hope you stay tuned and check out that episode next week. In the meantime, if you've gone through all of the World is Wrong podcasts, you could also check out Bryan's other podcast, The Director's Wall, where he and his co-host AJ Gonzalez are currently going through the filmography of Francis Ford Coppola. And you can also check out my other podcast, Radio 8 Ball, where we answer questions by picking songs at random and interpreting those randomly chosen songs as the answers to the questions, like picking musical tarot cards. And if you'd like to reach out to us to ask us any questions or give us any compliments or make comments on our dental hygiene, you can reach out to us at contact@theworldiswrongpodcast.com. You can find us on Instagram at The World Is Wrong Podcast. You can find us on Twitter at World Is Wrong Pod. And we're not on TikTok yet, but people keep telling us we should be on TikTok. And I'm like, I can't take another platform.
It's
please.
Too much.
But if someone out there wants to run if someone out there loves doing TikTok and wants to start a TikTok account for The World Is Wrong, we would welcome you to the production team.
What would that be, though? Isn't it just like would be a video of you dancing for like 15 seconds?
No, I think
like
it's a
sandwich or like
TCM has these. I think they would just show I think we just showed the same clips, some of the similar clips that we're showing on Instagram. But again, neither of us knows TikTok, so we probably shouldn't talk about it or tick about it. But just throwing it out there because Bryan, we live in a weird and troubled world. And luckily we have movies to brighten our days and our nights. But as we explore on this podcast all the time, the world isn't always right about these movies. In fact, wherever you are, the world is wrong. And it's probably wrong about you.
I found your private Reich up there. Or what was left of him. You didn't finish. Well, I can't blame you. He was tough. But then, a good soldier ought to be. You know, not that long ago, I couldn't do that. Could barely take a breath without coughing up a pint of blood. Tuberculosis. That along with fierce headaches, depression, suicidal ambition. I was in pretty horrible shape. In fact, I was on my way to a sanatorium to convalesce, more likely to die, when en route, this Indian scout told me a curious story. A man eats the flesh of another. He steals its strength. He absorbs the other man's spirit. Well, I just had to try. Consequently, I ate the scout first, and you know, he was absolutely right. I grew stronger.
Radio 8 Ball.
Andros here. When I'm not co-hosting the World is Wrong podcast, I'm hosting and producing the Radio 8 Ball podcast, where we answer questions by picking songs at random, like picking musical tarot cards. We've hosted musical divinations for people like John C. Reilly, Patricia Arquette, Tig Notaro, and Fred Armisen, and hosted over 200 songwriters, providing the randomly chosen answers from Inara George and Dan Byrne to Mose Allison and Alan Toussaint. That's Radio 8 Ball, all one word. You can find us wherever you get your podcasts and download our app from the iTunes App Store.
Show.